All right, gang. We talked about how the CRUD application is going to work, the culminating project, Project 2. And now we talked about customer form. And I mentioned the other files we're going to have are customer and modify. We talked about in a previous video how those are going to work. We did a slight modification of things too, and I'll show you that after. But I do want to do a comparison right now between customer form and customer to show you how closely they're related. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to do an ediff again, and I'm going to go up to the top of the file and change the font color, make it larger. Yes, and then do an ediff. So I'm going to do it on this, and then I'm going to do it on customer to show you how similar they are. Well, you notice that there's a timestamp going on over here. Now, one thing that's different is we're not using the core library here because we're not actually using a query string in the customer. So here in customer form, we're in customer form right now. You can see that we use a query string to decide what header we want for A4, A5, P2. So we're in the customer form.jsp. You could see that right here. Okay, we're right there. And everything after the question mark, of course, is the query string. Okay, but when I go to display customers, I told you that when I click any of these edit buttons here, which you'll see in another code, that here we're actually in the customer .jsp file. That's on the right hand side. So let me do this and make that a little bit larger as well. Okay. And then we're going to ediff this. Remember I told you that Emacs has this functionality to be able to differentiate between files, buffers, even directories. And when I start tapping the spacebar, I could use another key command as well too. It'll highlight the differences. So there it shows us we're pulling the tag library, which we don't need for the customer.jsp file. We don't need it for the modification of an individual record. Okay. Of course, you see the timestamp has been changed here. And here is all the logic on the left-hand side for customer form that we don't need. We don't need that. The one thing that I pulled in that's a little bit differently, and instead of doing the logic here, what I did was I just pulled in the header file to show P2. So you notice here, this is not the servlet. Customer admin. This is not the servlet here, customer servlet. This is actually customer.jsp, and I pulled in this header right there. You can see this highlighted on the right. The other thing I did is I added an H2 tag for update customer right here. Okay, did those two things. Okay, now let's keep ediffing this, so you can see that again on the left hand side it's just doing the Java Server Pages tags, which we're not using here, or at least not for the logic yet in our customer.jsp. Notice update. So the logic on the left-hand side is saying, okay, if it doesn't do any of that, we're going to send it back to the index page. We don't do that in customer.jsp. Instead, we add an H2 tag to get that, update customer, and we're going to continue down. Now, notice I put on the right-hand side an instructional message, and that message is if there's something wrong with the data that will post that message. Now that is just a placeholder. That's not actually being used right now, but I kept that as a placeholder in case that was going to be used for further date. Okay, first thing you want to notice here, notice on the left-hand side, if we were in customer form, the link would say display customers. That's on the left-hand side. On the right-hand side, though, it says that we want to, this is a form. Again, we're right here, just to be clear. You should be able to see that, but here, just to be clear, that's highlighted right now. The form ID is going to be edit customer form, and all that form ID is for, as you know, is for the client-side data validation, right? We need to have that ID for our JavaScript at the bottom, just like we used it for the add form, right? In customer form.jsp, we had the ID was add form instead of edit form. Notice it's still going to the customer servlet. But here, we called it, instead of we're calling it customer admin here, and that's going to the admin servlet, renaming it. You could name it whatever you want to. I'll show you where that is named in the customer servlet itself, and again, it's admin. So the servlets is always going to be customer admin, and you'll see the same thing over here in the customer form, right? Customer admin, right? So that servlet is the same one. And we're just going to keep ediffing here. Now, that's just used for testing purposes, so you could disregard that. Just have it in comments on the right-hand side. On the left-hand side, that's already just customer form. We already talked about that. Notice that we have a hidden field, and notice the difference. Notice the difference here. In our customer form.jsp file, we have a hidden form field. The name is add customer, and the value is add. In our customer.jsp file, notice we're using expression language here, and we're capturing that user ID. That user ID is being captured from the class that we created. And so what's happening is that we're using a different name. The name is going to be update customer, okay? And we're passing the value for user ID. And you'll see when we get to the servlet exactly what happens here and how we're getting that value. So we're passing the user's ID, and that user is an object variable. We instantiated an object of type customer, and that user object variable is I should say the object variable's name is user, and then we have a property for it called ID, which you'll see here shortly. Now what I'm going to do right now is make this, I'm going to change this up a bit here so that you could see that for the customer form, we're using customer F name, customer L name, and we changed it up in the customer.jsp file. So again, here we're in the customer.jsp file, this one on the right-hand side. Notice we're using user dot for all of them instead of customer dot. But the same name, the same max length, etc., etc. Going to the next one, user last name or user L name, user street instead of customer street. So we're using, you could pretty much copy and paste customer form, change the name to customer, and you have your edit functionality, except for some of the other changes that we just talked about. Customer cities here, customer state, instead of customer, it's user, user.state, user.zip, user.phone, user.email, user.balance, and user.total sales. Remember, the S is capitalized, user.notes. And then finally, we have an update button instead of a sign up button. So let me max this out here. I'm going to open this up in its own window. Here's a customer.jsp file. I'm going to max this out, change the font, and so it's going to be shown by itself. And you could see, I'll do this, nothing different here. There's nothing different here between customer form.jsp and customer.jsp. Nothing different here. Nothing different here. Here is where it's a little bit different. So here, what you would want to do, there's no business logic that's being used in customer.jsp like there was in customer form, so take out the business logic. We're just putting in, manually inserting a header for project 2, manually inserting an H2 tag, as I mentioned, right here. And then all we're doing, you don't even have to put this if you don't want to, but you could, because later on we might add a message to it. Make sure you have your form. The form is going to be being processed to the servlet customer admin. Okay, the customer admin. And again, you don't have to have this. This is for testing purposes as well too. And then make sure that you have your hidden input field. You must pass the ID. Because what's happening, gang, watch when I show you the form. Again, view the source so you could see what's happening. I'm going to view this source right here. I'm going to show you how it knows exactly what data it needs to be modified. A little bit too large there. In the hidden input field, as you can see right here, this is saying the name is update customer, and the value is 2. It's for customer 2. Well, if I select a different one, so I go back here, and I'll go to this third one right here, Felicia Fuller. Okay, if I right-click on the source here, you'll see that the value changed. And that's the primary key of that table, cus ID. It's returning that value. So that way, when we actually make a change to the record, it only affects that record, right? I'll just put a 2 here, update it, and you see that Felicia now is number 2. That's how it knows what record to change. And we have to include that hidden form field. Okay? Here, everything else is the same from the customer form .jsp file, except we prefix the expression language syntax here. Instead of customer dot, we're going to use user dot, and you'll see where that comes from. So here is the first name, last name, street, city, state, zip, phone, email, balance, total sales, and be careful about total sales. It's in a camel case, meaning that the first word is all lowercase, and the S in total sales, the S is capitalized. User notes, and then finally, be careful with this one as well too, gang. The name is sign up, and the value is update. That's for the update button that you see right here. Okay, that's for the update button. All right, and then finally, we end with our footer just like we did in the customer form.jsp file. All right, so that's customer .jsp. I can close out of this. I can close out of the diffing of the files, just to show you the differences between the two files. And what I'm going to do now is show you the, I'm going to save modify for the next video. I'm going to show you thanks. So let's go to thanks right now. Now the only thing that I did differently with thanks is changed from customer to user for all of these. So where you have customer dot, change that to user dot. And just to show you the thanks page, what it looks like, I'll do an add here. I'll do a quick add and put in a Jane. Okay, Jane Doe, and put in a value here for 100 and 500. Put that in and put in another HTML script past that. Here is the thanks page, and of course we want to make sure that we have the data. Did we add data? Yep. See how we deleted number 1, we made changes to number 2 and 4, and we added a new record, Jane Doe. The reason why it's not number 1 is because we're using auto increment. That's why it went to the next value. In the database we're using auto increment. Now notice the thanks page again. To the user, to the end user, it looks like they're using a servlet, customer admin. And in fact, the customer servlet is being used to process the data, but this is actually being passed to this page, thanks.jsp. And that's how we can print these values up. Notice we're using the tag library, using the prefix C again, and what we're using for the tag library is the out element. And that out element, what it's doing for us, the out tag, what it's doing for us is preventing cross-site scripting. So we're doing that for each one of these object properties. Again, don't forget to change customer dot to user dot in the thanks page. And the only other thing that we have to do here is this, gang. Make sure you make this modification as well too. So on line 56, make sure you have this form element like this that's processing the customer admin. Make sure you make sure the action is the same as I'm highlighting here, and then the name is being changed from action to thanks. Okay, the name is being changed from action to thanks, and that's all that we have to worry about here. Again, make sure. I know sometimes it's a little bit hard to read, but make sure that you change the customer dot object variable to user dot. Okay, that's the thanks page, and from there, all we have to do is we'll go to the next one we'll be doing is the edit page. I'm sorry, not the edit page. Pardon me, we're going to do the modify page. We're on it right now. This is the modify page. I'll make that a little bit smaller so you can see all the data, and I'll show that in another video. See you in a bit.